I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you are looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills I have acquired over a very long career. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. If you let my daughter go now, that'll be the end of it. I will not look for you. I will not pursue you. But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
Good luck.
I love that movie. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. I can tell you this, if you want money, I don't have it. But what I do have is a particular set of skills that make... How many of you have had a phone call like that recently? So that scene, of course, is from the movie Taken, where Liam Neeson plays a former CIA operative named Brian Mills, who sets about to this intense search and rescue for his daughter, who was visiting France and was kidnapped. And spoiler alert, it's an older movie, so no spoiler alert here. He kills the guy on the other end of that phone call and rescues his daughter. Well, he has to. It's not like, he didn't want to, but he has to. So last year, speaking of search and rescues, on Saturday, March 8th, 2014, I know you all will remember this. This is the day that Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia on its way to Beijing International Airport in China. And that Boeing 777 aircraft was carrying 12 Malaysian crew members and 227 passengers from 15 different nations. And the flight last made voice contact with air traffic control at 1:19 in the morning, disappeared off the radar 2 minutes later, and then a search and rescue effort was launched soon after the aircraft disappeared, and they were searching in the area where the last transmission was made. But then the following week, it was determined that the plane had actually continued to fly for several hours more, making it virtually impossible to figure out exactly where this plane was at. And so this has been the most exhaustive and expensive search operation in aviation history, nothing like it, involving multiple nations, millions of square miles, millions of dollars. But to this day, they have failed to locate even one single piece of debris from that plane. It's tragic. It's tragic. More search and rescue, an average of 3.4 billion people. Let me back up. 1 million people today spend a lot of time and money searching for love on search engines like eHarmony, or dating sites like eHarmony and Tinder. And an average of I love the laughs came from the younger generation here because they know about Tinder. It's an evil dating site. Okay, the average, and 3.4 billion people each and every day search the web on search engines like Google and Bing. Anybody know what the most searched topic for 2014 was? You're not going to guess. You think you know, but you don't. It was Robin Williams, believe it or not, and not until he died. So, and if you're absent-minded like me, which I'm certain that there are several in here who are absent-minded like me, you spend a fair amount of your time searching for your keys. Anybody? All right. I actually got online. I was going to get one of those key finders, the little tiles you can get or the little remotes that you can get. Then I thought, well, what good is that? Because I'll just lose the remote, and then I won't be able to find my keys. And now I'll have actually spent money trying to find my keys. So, and then, searching, if you think about it, searching is a frequent theme in the Bible. King Saul searched for David for over 15 years. As a young boy, Jesus wandered away from his parents' caravan. Remember, they launch a frantic search to try and find him. We're told that God searches the entire earth looking for a heart that is sold out for him. Jesus compared God's pursuit for those who have lost their way to that of a shepherd who would leave his entire flock just to go find that one lost sheep. And he told a similar story about a woman who lost a coin in her home, and basically she tore her house up all night long until she found that coin. And so searching is a frequent theme in the Bible, and as we continue in our Metamorphosis series, this life of transformation, we're calling this fourth step search and rescue, because the Bible has a lot to say about making a very thorough inward search of ourselves as a next critical step in experiencing true transformation. My all-time favorite verse about this personal transformation is found in Matthew chapter 7, verse 3 through 5. You probably didn't have this on your radar screen, but I love this. It says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye." This is actually a hilarious teaching. I mean, if you think of the visual that comes along with this, you basically have one guy who's got this huge plank protruding out of his eye socket, and of course, he's absolutely clueless that it's there. It's like this right here. And so while this guy is going around telling everybody else what's wrong with them, he's turning and he's smacking his plank into them, causing great harm. How many of you know a person like this? Okay? Put your hand down if that person is you. Oh, every hand went down. That's good. But what does Jesus say to the clueless person that we all know, but it's not us, right? Wink. First, get that plank out of your eye. And then you'll see clearly. You know, do your own personal searching. King David says it this way. Is he crying out? You probably not seeing Psalm 139 this way, but I see it as David crying out in verse 23 and 24. He says, "Search me, O God. Know my heart. Test me. And know my anxious thoughts, and see if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way." And you know, if you think about David and his life, David truly loved God. I don't have any question about that. But he had some real serious inner conflicts that led to some real serious moral failures in his life. And that's what I love about the Bible. It doesn't sugarcoat anyone's life. I mean, Eve couldn't control her appetite for power. Noah had a really bad drinking problem. Abraham had trouble telling the truth. Sarah invites her husband to sleep with another woman and then ends up hating her for it. Jacob was a con artist. Moses was horribly insecure. Solomon was a sex-addicted womanizer. Peter was incredibly impulsive. And Paul had persistent behaviors that he couldn't get under control. And all these men and women truly loved God, but they all had inner conflicts that led to moral failures. And King David, of course, had an affair with a married woman and then arranges to have her husband killed in battle. Doesn't get any more immoral than that, does it? And so here in Psalm 139, David acknowledges, as was read during the worship, that God created him in his mother's womb, that God knows his thoughts before he even speaks one of them, and that there's no place on earth that David could hide from God. And so knowing all this, David cries out in a broken and vulnerable moment, "God, I need your help. Search me. Probe into the deep, hidden recesses of my corrupted heart. Test me. I might look strong on the outside, but I am a wreck on the inside. See what's deep inside of me that needs transforming. I want to get off that never satisfying, destructive path of short-term pleasure. And I want to get on that everlasting path that leads to true and lasting shalom, wholeness. I want to be whole, God. I'm not whole. And at this point in David's life, he seems to have reached a place where he's open to a personal search and rescue mission, and maybe this is where you're at in your life as well. By the way, we don't usually get to this place willingly. Nobody signs up for this. Nobody wants to do this. Usually we get here because troubling events in our lives drag us there. Could be a moral failure or a struggling relationship or a disorder of some kind or an addiction or a major trial. And usually it takes multiple repeated events like these before we're finally ready for a search and rescue mission in our lives. In order to experience genuine metamorphic transformation, excuse the cliche, but we must be sick and tired of being sick and tired. Henry Cloud says it the best way. He says, we change when the pain of staying the way we are is greater than the pain of moving forward. Let me just soak on that for a second. We change when the pain of staying the way we are is worse than the pain we'll experience moving forward. Which is why the first point of this message is that searching is painful. I don't know how to sugarcoat it. I really don't. And no one likes to give a message like this because, I'd rather talk about God's blessing in our lives. But this is kind of a masked blessing. Last week, believe it or not, Brian gave a wrestling illustration. Can you imagine that? Brian? Only because football season is over and he's in the middle of wrestling. And so he mentioned that when a wrestler is subdued by his opponent, he can usually tap on the mat or he can tap on his opponent's body, and this will let him know that he is giving up. It's called tapping out. And step 4 is often the juncture when many people tap out of the metamorphic process because, frankly, it can be a very painful and overwhelming process. And if you think about an illustration from nature, it's not that easy to transform from a slithering, fuzzy caterpillar into a free-flying, beautiful butterfly, which is why I'm guessing God has these little guys fall into a cocoon-induced sleep during the entire metamorphic process. During this critical phase, from a caterpillar to a butterfly, all the tissues, all the limbs, all the organs of the caterpillar are completely transformed in only just a few weeks. So can you imagine how this would be a pretty dramatic life event experience if the caterpillars were completely awake during the entire process? Ouch! Oh my gosh! Wait a minute, what's happening to me? Wings? I'm afraid of heights. Where's my legs? I can't feel my legs, man. But they're cocooned. They're in an induced sleep. But unfortunately, there's no cocooned induced sleep phase for us. And we have to stay awake, and we have to stay engaged through the entire metamorphic phase of our transformation. But there's hope, because there is a best-selling book that you can get a hold of. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. Couch Potato Therapy by Rabbi Gene Binder. In this best-selling, biblically based self-help book, Rabbi Gene Binder shows you how to become the person you've always wanted to be without ever leaving the comfort of your couch. Over 10 million copies sold already. So I'd be glad to sign a copy for you after the service. Seriously, there's no escaping it. And this part of the journey can be a very long and very challenging process. And actually, believe it or not, President James Garfield says it best. He said this. He said, the truth will set you free, but first it's going to make you miserable. I love that. I mean, isn't that true in a way? It's like, oh my gosh. Once you can see, once the plank's out of your eyes, it's like, oh my gosh, what have I done to myself? So, which is why so many people tap out in this place. It's one of the most frustrating things for pastors, anybody in the counseling field, anybody in the help field, is that when you start opening up, when you start lifting this up a little bit, it's usually the time where people want to get out. So am I selling this okay? Huh? Are you ready to sign up for step 4? Or are you thinking about tapping out? Maybe I could sell it this way right here. This will do it.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Yeah, I love that. See, that movie actually, Matrix, actually has a lot of biblical themes running through it. That particular scene is awesome and is closer to reality than you think. The search and rescue step is a critical juncture that we must all face in our lives. There's no way to get around it. And so, will we take the red pill and choose to keep moving forward and see where it leads? Or will we take the blue pill and go back to living our lives and believing whatever we want to believe? And I call this critical juncture the Exodus principle. If you think about the Exodus story, the Jews have been in bondage for 400 years. And it's a really bad situation, right? And they cry out to God, and God delivers them. But he takes them from a bad situation to a worse situation. I mean, they're in a desert, for God's sake. There's no water, and there's no food, and there's like 2 or 3 million people. And so they begin to grumble. You'd grumble too. I'd grumble. But the phenomena here is kind of interesting because they would rather go back to bad than to live in worse. It's like they're saying, well, bad was bad, but worse is worse than bad. At least in bad, our stomachs were full. And the really sad thing about this is that they would rather go back to living in bondage than living free in the desert. Why? Because the desert is a very challenging place to live. I'm talking metaphorically here, right? And sadly, most people would rather live in bondage or go back to whatever it is that they were living and doing rather than to live in a wilderness. But listen to this and learn the lesson from the Exodus story. Write it down. If you haven't already figured it out, here it is. There's absolutely no way to get to the promised land without first crossing the desert. Now, you can argue with God on this one if you want, but there's just no other way to become mature without spending time in a desert. James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4 is just one verse of several that confirm this reality. He says, consider it pure joy. Consider it joy. He's some kind of a sadist here. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because that's what happens in a desert. But the reason why he says consider it pure joy, because it leads to something, right? Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. What do you need in the desert the most? Perseverance, because you're going to feel like tapping out. I want to get out of this desert just as soon as I can, but you got to let perseverance do its work, right? Why? So that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. A lot of times when I'm meeting with somebody and they're having a trial, they're wanting that trial to go away, and I'm saying, Lord, leave it there a little bit longer, will you? Let it do its work. Kind of scary knowing I'm praying that, so you're never going to come visit me anymore. In other words, don't tap out when it gets painful, because you will profit if you will just hang in there long enough. That is just a biblical principle for so many things, whether it's your marriage, whether it's your work, whether it's friendships. You know, Jesus said, and those who persevere to the end will be saved. There's just this principle that if you bail out too soon, you may lose the blessing that comes with it. Which brings us to the second point of this message. Searching is profitable. Turns out that in terms of searching, pain really does lead to gain. It really does. And Proverbs 27:17 says it this way: as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. That visual image in this passage is that of a piece of sharpening steel being purposely used to hammer and sharpen the edge of a steel sword or a knife or some kind of other tool. The process creates sparks, but it leads to beneficial conclusion. Now, both Andrew and I have been in the search and rescue mission in our own lives for the last 33 years. And most of you know that back then, I was a pretty messed up guy. Of course, now I'm only a slightly messed up guy. But I was abusing alcohol and drugs back then. My marriage was a disaster. I was a very insecure person, extremely insecure. And then I had all the behaviors that went along with that insecurity. And that's just really the easy stuff to share. And many of the last 32 years for both Andrew and I have been desert years. God has brought us into the desert several times over those years. And during most of those desert years, we were both in either a one-on-one relationship or a small group relationship or a combination of both that were what I call steel-on-steel sharpening relationships. These were either professional or peer relationships designed to take that dang plank out of our eyes because we couldn't see clearly. Why? Because it's impossible to remove the plank out of your own eye. I mean, that's the nature of deception, is you don't know. You know that old phrase, you only know what you know, or you don't know what you don't know? In order to remove the plank out of our eyes, we need to have people in our lives who will help us see things that we can't see ourselves. Here's another verse that describes this kind of steel-on-steel relationship. Proverbs 27:6 says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but the enemy multiplies kisses. It's a great, great passage. In other words, an enemy tells you what you want to hear, but a friend tells you what you need to hear. And if you think about your friendships, you'll know who a true friend is, because a true friend will risk the friendship by telling you things in your life. We need stuff, but an enemy is someone who just kind of whispers sweet things in your ear, always just telling you how great you are, even though they may be thinking, what a mess you are. Years ago, I saw this chart here called the Johari window. Maybe some of you know about it. It's very helpful for me in thinking about this relationship. And actually, in this chart, you really need, and from Scripture, you really need a threesome relationship. So you have someone in your life, and you see this top window is that which is shared. Sometimes it's called open. In other words, these are things that are known to you, and they're known to others. So usually very obvious things, and you're okay, you're comfortable with putting those things out on the table. They're not in a box anywhere. They're exposed. They're shared. They're open. Then on the bottom left, you've got things that are known to yourself, but things that you're not sharing with others. That's what's inside this box here that Brian's been showing you. These are all the things I'm not going to show you. I'm going to do my best to keep these things away from you. There's a lot of reasons why we do that. Fear, insecurity. And then top right, these are things known to you or not known to you. You can't see them, but others can. They're obvious to other people. Listen, we all have those things. I have those things. And then the bottom right are things that neither the people in your life nor yourself can see. Only God can see those things. And so the threesome relationship is that you need others in your life, people with skin on, but you need the Holy Spirit as well as you're walking through this search and rescue phase of the transformation. You got to have that. I've had several of those kinds of relationships over the years to unpack the things that are in these windows. Some of them were one-on-one, some of them were in group, but in each of these situations, we all gave each other permission to tell each other things that were hard to hear. The wounds of a friend can be trusted. As iron sharpens iron, so a person sharpens one another. And people would say to me things like, well, Gene, you know, you're kind of passive-aggressive, I noticed. Maybe you can learn how to share your hurts and disappointments in a more direct and timely and healthy way. Ouch. You're a little defensive, Gene. I mean, we bring these things up, but then you spend the next hour defending why they're not true. You might want to pay a little more attention to your wife's needs, Gene. And don't use so many cheesy illustrations in your sermons. Okay, I didn't listen to all the advice. So here's another huge takeaway from this message. That first takeaway was you can't get to the promised land without first passing through the desert. Here's the second one. If you don't have people in your life, steel on steel relationships, you will not grow. End of story. End of story. No man and no woman is an island because no one becomes a mature man or a mature woman without steel on steel friends. It takes sparks to grow. And if you surround yourself with people who will only tell you what you want to hear, your life is doomed to be stunted. And so searching is painful. It's a critical juncture in this transformational stage. I mean, we're really going to have a hard time getting through the rest of this series if this one isn't put in place. And we want to help you, by the way. We've got so many ministries here. You can talk to John in our men's ministry. He can connect you. Women, our women's ministry. You've got the Thrive group that's meeting right now during second service. You've got the Healing Prayer Group. There's so many places where you can plug in and find different levels of safety, because sometimes, you know, you got to take those baby steps because it's pretty risky to go right from nothing to everything. It's highly recommended to do so, but I get it. And the second thing is searching is profitable. If you will just persevere through those moments where you want to tap out and get past that, there is a blessing at the other end of this. And so, worship team, oh, hey, look at you.
I was in first time. No worries.
Do you have any other people that are going to hang out with you? They all bailed, didn't they? Yeah.
They're a dance class.
A dance class. Now, I get this because, like I told you, there was just several times that God had Andrew and I in a desert. They're hard places to be. I mean, it's just, we had one just recently in the last couple of years. We feel like we're out of that desert time at the moment, but they're really hard. I mean, sometimes you can't tap out too, but you feel like it, and you feel it can get weary. And so if you're here this morning and maybe you've been in the desert for a while and you're having a hard time persevering, I want to read to you something in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2 through 3, that I hope will encourage you, particularly in light of, on the first Sunday of each month we do the communion together. And this is what it says. It says, "Let us fix our eyes on Yeshua, the author and perfecter of our faith." I love that. Fix your eyes on the one who made you and will continue to write your story in your life. And I love this. Here's this another joy thing in the context of something that doesn't sound joyful. Who for the joy set before him endured the cross. That doesn't make sense, right? Any more than trials make sense to be joyful through them. But it leads to something. I mean, don't ever think that it wasn't painful for Jesus, but he had joy because he knew what the benefit was. And it wasn't his benefit, it was our benefit. He scorned the shame of the cross. Did you ever think about that? The cross is a shameful place. I mean, it's a beautiful place, but it's a shameful place. It's where Jesus made atonement. He was put on a tree. But what was worse is what was put on him. The sins of mankind. Every despicable thing that we've ever done was put on his shoulders. It's a shameful place. But for the joy, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. And then afterward, he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And here's the words: "Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary, you will not tap out, you will not lose heart." That's what this table means. This is the place where shame and fear and disappointments and every other emotion that you can think of, every behavior that you can think of is dealt with. And so I want to do one thing before you come up here. And I'm going to just tell you right from the very beginning, it's risky. All right? So your heartbeat should be beating a little heavier right now. I'm going to ask you to take a risk. But I want you to trust me. But this will be risky, and I'm going to stretch you here for a minute. So in your seat pockets in front of you, if you need it, there are pieces of paper and pens. I'm going to ask you to write something on this piece of paper, so go ahead and go forward. If you have a pen and paper with you, please use it so there'll be enough for everybody in the last service. So I'm going to take just a second for you to grab a pen and a piece of paper. Oh, those are already written on. So, yeah, I forgot about the first row. Just look behind you. The seat pockets. Up there in the balcony, they're up on the railing. You can grab one there. Okay, here's what I want you to write on this piece of paper. Are you ready? I want you to write the one thing that you could never share with anybody else. Okay, I want the top thing. I don't want that one thing that maybe you wouldn't mind if somebody saw it. I want that one thing that you, right now, you absolutely couldn't share it with anybody. Okay? It's going to be a little risky for you. All right, I want you, just hold on for a second, because you're doing what everybody else does. You're just staring at me. Because you're thinking, well, what's he going to do, right? What am I going to have to do with this piece of paper? I really don't want you to write the one thing you can't share with people. Here's what I want you to write on the piece of paper. I want you to write what you were feeling when I asked you to write that one thing, okay? Would you write it down? You know, were you feeling shame? Were you feeling fear? Were you feeling anger towards me? What were you feeling? Write it on that piece of paper. And then as you come forward to take the elements, bring that little piece of paper up with you. I encourage you to take some time on the steps and just be thankful that this is the place where God deals with all of that stuff. You know, it says in Titus, for the grace of God has appeared to mankind once and for all. The grace of God, it, pointing back to the grace, it teaches us to say no to ungodliness as we wait the coming of our Messiah. Grace. This is the grace place right up here where Jesus, for the joy, endured the cross, scorning its shame. And you can come here because it's all been covered, all of it. Your past, your present, your future, all covered by the blood of Yeshua. Every bit of it. This is not about attaining some higher moral ground. Search and rescue is not about attaining some higher moral ground. It is learning from our failures. It is growing from all our failures. That's what the desert is all about. You never stop needing Jesus. Do you know that? You are never going to be perfected in this lifetime. And so let's stand. And please take those pieces of papers and deposit them on the steps, will you? As kind of a symbolic gesture that you're leaving them here. You're leaving your shame, you're leaving your anger, you're leaving your fear. You're giving it all to Yeshua, who takes it all upon his shoulders. Okay, does that make sense? Let's worship together.